The member for Bowman.
Deputy Speaker, it's a great tragedy that today's debate, which could have been bipartisan, which could have been two sides of parliament working together to look after severely ill tuberculosis patients from Papua New Guinea, who for years have been treated by the finest infectious disease physicians from Queensland Health, only to be nickel and dime by a combination of a Queensland Labor Premier looking for a short answer with less dollars to spend and a Prime Minister who simply didn't have the will and the commitment to find a solution. Now, to fall back and blame the treaty is one thing, but to embark on a personal attack against the local member who knows these islands so far is nothing short of a disgrace. And, Deputy Speaker, we all love and work hard for our constituents, and none of us here would ever suggest that those on the other side don't do that. But to effectively contribute in this debate some ridiculous statement accusing the federal member for Leichhardt for not having visited the islands concerned is very, very disappointing. And coming from the member for Shortland, who is so far away from the focus of this debate, who has probably never even seen a desperate PNG national crossing by dugout canoe in the hope that they can get a family member or a child treated by the world's #2 health system in the country, is heartless, if not completely disappointing. It is a disgrace to make comments like that in a debate like this, because we had a chance, Deputy Speaker, a chance to get this right, a chance to inject a relatively small amount of money into making sure that our biosurveillance remains intact and that people who on compassionate grounds need life-saving tuberculosis care can access it. Now, Deputy Speaker, it was neither you nor me that designed the fact that Australia would be within 2 miles of Papua New Guinea. Neither you nor me who are responsible for the fact that the world's 174th ranked health system abuts by just a narrow isthmus of water the #2 health system in the world. So we do have to adopt to the inevitable people movements, up to 50,000 of them a year, and of course the desperate attempts by PNG nationals to seek out tuberculosis care. This is an endemic disease. This is one of the 3 great killers in the world, and it's only 2 kilometres away from us here in Australia in the Torres Strait. And you'd almost think those on the other side don't recognise that Torres Strait Islanders are Australian citizens. And I'm sure that if we lived that close to the perils of TB, we would be calling out to the lawmakers of the day to find a way to ensure that the most simple tasks of distributing tuberculosis treatments to people who live along that Western Province coastline was possible. But alas, it is not. In forming this debate, Deputy Speaker, one just needs to talk to people like Fred Geller from the Torres Strait Regional Island Councils, or Toshi Chris, as the member for Leichhardt has, the chair of the TSRI, or even Ron Anosa. These are the people on Saibai who know exactly what it's like. And it's a complete affront to come down to a debate in the nation's heart, be it 2,000 or 3,000 kilometres away, and wipe away and ignore such eminent and informed figures in the Torres Strait Islands and turn this debate into a naked partisan breakdown where basically one blames the other for the suffering of PNG nationals. Now, there is plenty of precedent for overseas nationals receiving Australia's first-class care, and there's plenty of committed clinicians who are already delivering it, already travel at great expense to their own practices to Saibai and Boigu with nursing support and with top-quality TB expertise to deliver the service. Now, it's not a major distortion to PNG health services because that entire coastal belt of PNG, no, even Indonesia itself, is racked with the endemicity of chronic TB. But the great challenge we have, Deputy Speaker, if we're going to enter this clinical space, we have to do it right. And we have to completely treat people, as has been mentioned earlier in this debate. And the risk of extreme resistance or even partial resistance to our TB treatments simply presents Australian citizens with an even greater challenge, and that is that with extreme resistant TB to all drugs known to mankind in the medical system, we face that risk that an Australian can be infected by TB and be utterly untreatable by all the technology and all of the antibiotics and all of the advanced drug families, the second-line treatments known to the medical profession. Let's go through the history of this dispute, because only a year ago things were going well. And it makes you wonder, just what does a Labor government have to do to get in and spoil what is a perfectly functioning clinical arrangement serving about 30 serious TB patients each year by visiting those islands of Saibai and Boigu and at the same time maintaining the biosurveillance that is so important for the northern parts of Australia. Well, here it goes. First of all, Premier Anna Bligh spent herself into deficit within an inch of her fiscal life, hits $85 billion in debt and says, well, who can we find that's young, that's small and vulnerable and doesn't vote for me? Well, let's pick some Papua New Guinea citizens. There's not much they can do if we cut off their medical care. So off she went, wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. And you would have thought, Deputy Speaker, that the Prime Minister of this nation would have looked upon that challenge and said, this is clearly a simple resource issue. We have the skills, we have the capacity, we have the distribution networks. We have, after all, the health system. And we have $500 million every year poured into Papua New Guinea, so surely we already have the will, the commitment and the historical precedent. But no, there was this breakdown. There was in the correspondence from early this year this subtle suggestion, no, we won't be opening the purse strings because we're running the economy just as badly in Canberra as you are in Brisbane. No, that wasn't inserted in the letter. But what was referred to as an external arrangement would be reached, and that was code for dipping into the AusAid pot because that was a little bit more generous at the time, and surely we could find some money in there to come up with an alternative. And this was the sudden prospect that after 25 years in this space, that we could actually begin a Western Province TB program domiciled in Papua New Guinea in just 3 months. That's right. This Labor notion that we could train clinicians, distribute drugs, get DOTS going and have field workers trained in TB in just 3 months. And you know what was more important than all of that? What was more important for these two jurisdictions was to cut off the clinics that come from Cairns, take the best people up there and offer the clinical support. And for someone like the federal member for Leichhardt, who has personally met the families involved, like the PNG man who brings down his dying daughter, only to see her with cerebral TB lose her life, even and despite the best care available in Australia, and to have to look after that gentleman and all of the arrangements that had to follow. And this became a personal commitment by the federal member for Leichhardt, working with partners in Cairns, because this TB issue is one that is real for Northern Australia. May not be real if you come from Melbourne, may not be real in this debate here today, but if you're up there on the frontier, this is incredibly important. If you're representing Torres Strait Australians who are Australian citizens, it's really important because they have the cultural connections. They travel for trade and they travel for markets, they travel for family connection, and unfortunately with TB endemicity does come the risk to Australian citizens. Look, we didn't set about turning this into a potent and toxic political divide today. What we really wanted was some agreement from the other side, that we could take this up to this committee and have general agreement in a non-controversial way, that together we can talk to the providers of this care and find a better way to do it. Has anyone on the other side talked to Horn Island? Have they talked to the Torres Strait about other ways of looking after the severely ill instead of having to transport them to Cairns or further? There are more cost-effective ways to do it, but this whole arena, this whole clinical area has been abdicated by the two jurisdictions that are in question in this motion. So to people like to Fred Geller, Toshi Chris and to Rona Nosa, I am compelled now to say, after this is completely broken down as a result of the appalling contribution from this member for Shortland, that we on this side of the chamber will not forget their needs. We know this is a complex issue, but we're not going to pretend that there is a TB program in PNG when there isn't. And already this morning I'm receiving communications from the infectious disease clinicians in Cairns saying that the same patients that they saw and handed over last month have not received their follow-up drugs in Papua New Guinea. No, they haven't. I mean, for all the effort in the world after a generation, there is still not the capacity anywhere in Papua New Guinea to look at a sputum sample and work out what treatment is needed for one of their own citizens. So don't pretend in this place that AusAid has the answers to this challenge in a month. 3 years? Perhaps. That's a noble goal to set up a TB program, to train the PNG locals to directly observe the taking of TB medications and not, as they do so compassionately, as has been pointed out before, share their TB medications with family and friends, innocently believing that that will cure them as well, when it simply makes the matters worse. We need education. We need coordinators who have real telephones and are able to communicate with carers in both Daru, Port Moresby and Cairns. Most of all, we need the mobility through the use of maritime vessels to ensure these services are provided right along the villages. But what we need more than anything, Deputy Speaker, is an injection of reality into this debate. It won't be done overnight. It's ridiculous to kill off the clinics and then talk about solutions. And worst of all, I think, and most duplicitous, to have these two jurisdictions squirting out press releases, reassuring everyone that it will be okay in Papua New Guinea, when anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes studying TB or more than 5 minutes on one of those islands know it is a far more complex proposition. The intent of this motion for the member for Leichhardt was to raise this issue publicly and to garner the support of the government, something that I'm very, very disappointed to say has not been achieved.